The Department of Justice's report on police abuses of power in Ferguson, Missouri continues to reveal damning details of the ways that both the police and the courts have routinely abused both their power and the people living in Ferguson. And they've identified two apparently principal motivators for that abuse. Last week, or earlier this week, I should say, we revealed the extremely racist emails that have been routinely passed around both by the police and by the courts. And we've got more for you, and they are shocking. We also find out that money was one of the key motivators for a systematic abuse of power in pretty much every facet of Ferguson life. The report found that city police and court officials have worked in concert to maximize revenue at every stage of the enforcement process for several years. City and police leadership pressure officers to write citations independent of any public safety need and rely on citation productivity to fund the city budget. Many officers have no tools for de-escalating emotionally charged scenes, and they themselves routinely dismissed parking tickets for their friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. So, on the one hand, they are attempting to give as many tickets and fines and fees as possible, and in some cases, as we'll show you, locking individuals in Ferguson into a cycle that they effectively cannot leave, where they are paying fees for the rest of their life. Giving out crazy amounts of citations. We've heard that in a city of 16,000 people, in some years, they've had 9,000 or 10,000 arrest warrants in a community of 16,000 people.
Yeah, I have to jump in on this point. This is not unique to Ferguson. This is something that's happening throughout the entire country. It's a form of regressive taxation. This is what happens when you don't have the rich pay their fair share of taxes, right? All of a sudden, you have to come up with the revenue. And what do? You start having people pay more money to park their cars on the street. You start issuing more citations. You basically go after the middle class and the working class. It's not unique to Ferguson. It's a disgusting way to make up revenue.
Yeah. So a couple of examples. They have internal emails where they brag about, oh, we raised more revenue by giving out more fines and traffic tickets, but to the right people, not to the wrong people. Because as John read to you, and that's part of that is so frustrating. When it comes to their friends, colleagues, and acquaintances, they're off scot-free. Yeah. They don't even pay the fine, let alone the interest that they put on the fines, let alone the arrest that they make off the fines, etc. No, they get none. I mean, the thing is, if you are the beneficiary of this, you might know if, your friend in the police department got rid of a traffic ticket for you. But what you might not know is if you never got the traffic ticket in the first place, right? Yeah. Well, and what you certainly don't know is the experience of the people who did get those tickets. And you think, traffic ticket, what's the big deal? Well, this one woman who's not a wealthy person at all, she's an African-American woman in that neighborhood, gets multiple citations on one violation in a parking violation. She gets a $151 fine. That's already a bit devastating. It's devastating almost for anybody, right? That's a big number. So she has trouble paying it. She tries to pay it throughout.
Homeless from time to time as well.
Yeah.
But she makes an earnest effort. She tries to give $25 one time, another time $50 as to begin to pay off her. The court says, no, I don't want it. It's a partial payment. It's a technicality. You're not allowed to take partial payments. But then what they do is they start fining her more and more because they're saying, well, now you're not paying it. But she's like, but I tried. So it winds up that she's already paid $550, okay, on the original $151. But they say she still owes $541. The debt is endless, and it gets worse. She's been arrested twice. She spent 6 days in jail. And then what job opportunities does she have after that? Yeah. You've been arrested. You spent time in jail. The government's still trying to track you down to get the extra $550, which you never owned in the first place. And this is how they systematically crush and oppress people. But you never see it because you're not in that neighborhood. Yeah, exactly. And then you turn around and you go, what racism, man? We elected Obama. What are they still complaining about? This is what they're complaining about.
But it gets worse than that, right? So when you have a police force that goes after these people and continuously antagonizes them, then you can't turn around and look at this community and say to them, why aren't you complying with cops immediately? It's because they don't trust cops, right? So you can't expect them to comply 100% when A, oftentimes they do comply and they're brutalized anyway, and B, they're brutalized before they're even in any type of trouble. They're being targeted by the cops in these cases.
Yeah. So there's a specific example of that too. And as the writer here points out, you should go read the report. I know most people obviously won't, but it's a case study in how not just minorities, but poor people are oppressed in this country. So a guy goes out and plays basketball, comes back from basketball, cop comes by and accuses him of being a pedophile. He's like, what the hell are you talking about? Oh, you're by a playground. He's like, I know, I just played basketball there. Are you ignoring my orders? Get out of the car, okay? And you're dangerous, but I'm not armed. Oh, are you? I think you might be. I'm going to search you. I'm going to do a pat down, and I'm going to search your car. Now, when you go through that experience, I mean, if it happened to, let's say, a guy who's a Second Amendment advocate, and he's got a gun in the car, and the cops want to question his gun, he'd be furious, right?
Right.
But in this case, the guy doesn't even have a gun. He just got done playing basketball. So my point, one of my points here is, how often have you played basketball? Me, thousands of times. And I never got bothered outside a park, right? Nobody ever came to pat me down and accuse me of being a pedophile out of the blue, right? So I don't know that I'm avoiding that discrimination. I don't know that that's what he's got to deal with his whole life. So to Anna's point, that's why they don't trust them, because they have excellent reason not to trust the police, because the police have been haranguing them, unduly targeting them, and bringing them to prison and all these things unjustly for years and decades on. You think the Michael Brown protests sprung out of just one incident?
Yeah.
No, it sparks a flame because already people knew that they were being crushed. And that's what this Department of Justice investigation shows. And that's why it's so valuable. Just please try to learn from it so we can do better.
Well, I think what's disappointing is how long it took for the Department of Justice to actually investigate this kind of thing. Remember, it reminds me of the predatory banking practices. Remember how, until they passed the new law, then if you were late for one $2 charge for coffee, then you got a $39 charge on top of that on your credit card. And then they would continue to charge on top of it so that somebody would end up paying thousands of dollars in fines and fees because that was the nature of this predatory banking. And now this is essentially predatory policing. They're not just using it to fund the work of the finances of the city and the municipality. They're also using it to sort of keep these people from actually being able to get beyond these fees. And it's like you said, it has devastating consequences in people's lives. I mean, the guy that was pulled over at the after playing basketball, he lost his job. You won't be able to get a job after that. So it actually keeps these people in poverty.
And one of the charges, by the way, that made him lose his job is when the cop asked him his name, he said, "My name's Mike." But because his name is technically Michael on his ID, they charged him with fraud. That was one of the charges against him.
These are made-up charges.
And understand something, that guy was a federal contractor. That means he'd already been approved by the government. He's got a job as a federal contractor, and he lost it because he told the cop his name was Mike. When it is Mike, right? And if you get targeted like that, if that happened to you day in, day out, you wouldn't be skeptical of the cops? So I need you to open your mind and understand that perhaps they have a different perspective than you. It's not that I'm telling you cops come and oppress you in your neighborhood. I'm telling you that's happening and you're not seeing it. You're not, but they do see it because that's their perspective. This is a slow motion Jim Crow. And so we never got rid of it. And so, Anna mentioned the 9,000 warrants on cases in 2013 alone. Just on the fines and fees, not 9,000 warrants overall, just on these traffic violations, these citations, etc. And they joke around in the emails like, ha, we raised more revenue from them. And so they cut taxes on the rich, and then they raise revenue in this way. And they even talk about how they can't remove certain judges, even though they know that the judge is not fair, because they can't slow down revenue. And that judge gives out more and more citations, and he keeps that money coming, right or wrong, just or unjust. They don't care. This is the system that oppresses people in this country. And again, yes, it happens to minorities disproportionately, but it also happens to the poor across the board, all across the country, no matter what the race is. And so we got to change this. If we don't change this, then we're not living in the same country. I mean, we're back to a situation where we have lords who rule us. And and to them, I guess they think it's a joke because that's what they do in the emails, whether it's racist emails or in the emails where they talk about we raised more revenue from them. We knew there were more sales tax cuts coming for us, so we raised revenue from them. It's grotesque.
So we continually spotlight cases from around the country that sort of demonstrate this pattern. And there are certainly other outlets that have done it. I mean, it took until Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown and those sorts of cases for them to be willing to do it. But this should be like the biggest issue. If you're a traditional conservative, if you're a traditional libertarian, and you talk about freedom, like they bring up bullshit examples of how people lose their freedoms in this country. But imagine living in what is effectively a low-grade North Korea, where everything you do is criminalized. Even sitting outside of a park is a criminal act. How can you say that these people are in any meaningful way free when everything about their life, they're just seen as walking wallets that the government can take money from if you look at a cop the wrong way, if you say the wrong thing to a cop? You have absolutely no freedom, and they don't care at all about it. Because for the most part, the people don't look like them or the people that they spend time with.
If your manner of walking down the street bothers the cop, then the cop can give you a ticket, according to this.
That's what
By
happened
the
to Michael
way,
Brown.
what happened to Michael Brown? His manner of walking down the street bothered Officer Wilson, and he eventually shot him in the head.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's also an enormous case of projection. When they say, oh, class warfare, and all the Democrats want to do is take money from our class and give it to the other class. They're projecting because that's what they've been doing.
Yeah.
They've been doing class warfare, except they're doing it on the most powerless people in the country.
Mugging the poor.
They're
mugging the working class.
That's exactly right, man. We got to get up and we got to fight back.